he had to take care of them. He looked at them as his children, and he took care of them. Now they didn't live in the big house, granted, but they lived in, some of them lived in shacks, some of them lived in villa houses, and a lot of that, living in them little shacks, was their own doing. By the way, if you study history closely, they'll show you now these slave shacks, and I got all the sympathy in the world for that. But a lot of it was because they was too lazy to get up and fix them up in places to live. The material and the right to do it was there, but they didn't do it. They just did what they got, like a lot of people do this time. Anyway, that's enough about that. South Carolina seceded from the Union. They met over here at the church in First Baptist Church in Columbia, and the next day they moved it to Charleston. They found out that there was a lot of opposition to it, to the movement here in Columbia, and they had a better chance, these politicians had a better chance of getting it passed if they moved it to Charleston. So they put out a rumor, and it pretty much been proven that it was just a rumor that there was smallpox in the area. Moved it.
Ron, did they pay your copy?
There they had no problem. They seceded from the Union, and for some time, South Carolina was a sovereign nation. Now this is the second time it had been a sovereign nation. When it withdrew from England, before the United States was formulated, it was a sovereign nation for a short period. And had a president.
Great, thank you. Y'all have a great day.
This time, the time that they seceded from the Union, it wasn't but a few months. But they didn't go into the Confederacy with the thought of it, war. They didn't go in. It was just that it was legal. They taught it at West Point. Robert E. Lee, Beauregard, Anderson, who was the Yankee general down here at Fort Sumter, all of them learned it in their law courses at West Point. The United States was formed, and every state that joined it had the right to leave it at any time for any reason or for no reason. You ever thought about why they didn't prosecute Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy? Or they brought charges against him. They were going to kill him, they were going to hang him, they were going to do this, but they never ruled on it. It never went to court, never came to court. Later on, some of the justices and stuff wrote that if it had ever come to court, we'd have had the rule that the South broke no law. They had the legal right to secede from the Union. And therefore, Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, who was asked to be president, broke no law. They broke no laws, but they lost the war. Why? Well, they went into it not looking for a war. Y'all know the story of Fort Sumter and what happened down there. We won't go into all that history. I don't think we got that much time.
You got about 8 minutes.
I'd like to come back and do another presentation if y'all would like to hear it. But y'all know the story of Fort Sumter. You don't know the real story. I'd love to tell it to you. It'll jerk your heart. They loved Anderson, the Yankee that was the head down there. Beauregard then went, he taught Beauregard at West Point. They were friends, old friends, loved each other. He fed them. They didn't sell no food to eat. The Southerners helped. They went over to Charleston, had pond and everything. It was just until right at the end when the Confederate government finally said, you got to get them out of there. And Lincoln wouldn't give Anderson the orders to vacate, and he, as a soldier, could not vacate Fort Sumter. They couldn't do it.
So him and Beauregard had, and this is on record, folks, they got together and met and formulated a plan of how Anderson could surrender Fort Sumter with dignity. He said, I'll fire on you, and you fire back until you run out of ammunition. You didn't have no ammunition much over there. You'd have a little bit of ammunition. He said, but as long as I got ammunition, I can't surrender this fort with dignity. He said, all right, we'll fire on you. You fire back till you run out of ammunition, and when you do, put up a white flag, that'll be it. When there's so-called surrendered Fort Sumter, when you conquer something, you go in and you take it over, you take the flag down and throw it in the dirt and run the people out. They allowed Anderson to take the flag down with a 100-gun salute. He took it down. Unfortunately, one of the cannons exploded and killed some of his men, and they reduced it to 50 rounds. But he brought the flag down, he folded it up, he went on the ship and took it with him, unfurled it on the ship as he was going out. There were ships outside the harbor. And the Confederate soldiers who had descended on Charleston at Beauregard's command stood around the bay in Charleston as that ship left Fort Sumter and went out through that bay to put them on the ship and go up north. Stood at attention with the caps over their heart. The entire Charleston harbor at attention with the caps over their heart out of respect for Yankee. If that won't touch your heart, beloved, nothing will. They loved the man. Later, yeah. I'm going to reduce this a little bit. 4 years later, after we had lost the war, Anderson came back down. They were using him for propaganda, him and the flag at that time. And they sent him down April the 14th. They raised the flag over exactly 4 years after they took it down. They raised it over Fort Sumter again, and Anderson was there, and all the Southerners were there, and everybody was rejoicing. They were glad the war was over. Y'all don't know what happened to Charleston. They totally obliterated Charleston. I mean, totally obliterated Charleston. Way back, almost the whole thing. I had 3 ancestors that lived there with doctors. And I know that's the story that But they raised the flag at about 2 o'clock, I think it was, sometime in the afternoon. And big pageantry and everything. That night, Bush shot the president. Lincoln. Very few people know that. And Johnson became the president. But was a group, was a member of a little group that wanted to perpetuate the Confederacy and wasn't going to give up. There was about half nuts, all of them. And there was supposed to be 3 people killed that night. The other one got him, but he got 2. And shot him. And then broke his leg, and y'all know that story. Blood fixed his leg. That's the reason today you hear the expression, your name is Blood got a lot of riff-raff because he fixed the leg. Then you know who he was. Anyway, that's another story. There's a story behind every story. But what I want to bring out in this last 2 minutes, what just happened here in the United States. The South lost the war between the states because in the end, after Appomattox, Lee was standing up there. They had just supplied all the Yankee troops with brand new rifles. I forget what the name of them was, but they were rifles, repeaters. Poor old Southerners, they had pulled everybody down to children and out of they robbed, as Grant said, they robbed the cradle and they robbed the grave. They don't have any more people to bring into their army. There was about 3 to 1 Northerners in population. They could still draw more people and supply their army. They could still draft and whatever. The South couldn't. The South was ill prepared with the ammunition and the guns. They were starving to death. They were ragged. They were in bad shape. And here's Lee standing up there at Appomattox facing Grant and this humongous army. And he made the only decision that a politician has ever made that made any sense. He went over and capitulated. He never surrendered. They call it a surrender. He went over and talked. Him and Grant was talking. His officers talking. They had been talking about it. Grant knew where he stood too. Grant loved him. He loved Grant. He did. Hey, I don't have to mean to defend myself. Let's end it right here. They signed the papers and they made it up as a surrender paper. And Lee signed it, got on his horse, and rode off. His men were very upset that he did that. But it was the only sensible decision that had been made for a long time. Because they were facing annihilation of the whole point. And that's where the South stood at that time. They South has suffered ever since. We are a conquered nation. The Confederate States of America was a legal nation, and it still exists today. A group out of Charleston contacted me some 2 years ago and then come down and talk to them. They were going to restart the Confederacy. I sent them a note back. I said, y'all crazy.
Okay.
I'm not coming down there. I'm not going to even talk to you. If you want to start the Confederacy, elect the president and you're in business. It's never been surrendered. The Confederacy still exists. The General Assembly has created the Confederacy, and nobody ever surrendered. Davis didn't surrender it. Lee didn't surrender it. Johnson didn't surrender it. Nobody ever surrendered it. It still exists today. I don't think I'd try to revive it if I was y'all, but that's the legality of it. But it was a legal nation. What scares me today, the politicians at that time, thinking that they were doing what they ought to do, bickered and brought this thing to a point that it started a ball rolling that wound up with us suffering for the next 200 years. Annihilation of the South, because politicians bickered with each other. The average American out here didn't care. My people thought I was plowing a mule. They didn't care who the president was. But when they said fight, he had to drop it and go fight. And he did. And so, anyway, now, what just happened in Washington? Our politicians bickering about a budget. Now, I'm a financial person. Those of you who are not trained in finances, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. We are not anymore on an American level. We're in a world level. We are out there with China and all these great big Russia and all these big countries all over the world is who we are dealing with now. And the politicians didn't think that they had the guts to degrade our credit rating. But they did. Now, we ain't broke. We can print some more money. Pay our bills. Like we've been doing. But what I'm scared of is the politicians have gotten us into a point now where they've started the ball rolling. These people out there, China ain't scared of us no more. They degraded us, we ain't done nothing because we can't do nothing. Be careful with your politicians. Talk to your politicians. Less in 5 to 10 years, we be speaking Chinese. You know how many Chinese people there are in the world? I told somebody that the other day, he said, you crazy, China can't take America. Yeah, they said the North couldn't take South, too. They said the Southerners can beat 6 times. We cocky us Americans. Don't you believe it? They've started a ball rolling in the world that has degraded America in its standing in the world. Let's talk to our politicians and make sure that they start using some common sense up there and quit bickering among themselves because they're Democrats or Republicans. Thank you.